What do you think are the most important solutions at the state level to address sea level rise and flooding?
Good evening.
We lost
not.
it.
Test test.
Here we go. In the interest of time, just go.
Good evening. My name is David Bogner. I am running for State House District 76. On the state level, there's a number of things that we can do in the State House. One of the biggest things that we can do is provide funding for local projects. I went out to an Island Park Citizens meeting earlier in the month, and if you remember, last year, both before Irma and during and after Irma, they suffered massive flooding that lasted for weeks and weeks and weeks. One thing that the county got to try and fix that was money for a drainage ditch, except the county had been sitting on the money and hadn't put out any bids for about 2 months, and we were getting close to when the money would expire. So on the state level, we can bring funding to help projects to address issues of flooding and issues of sea level rise. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Neil Ayers. I've been a resident of Lee County for about 25 years now, a little more. I got into this race because I was concerned about water quality, and I have some experience. I worked for Cerro Bay Aquatic Reserve for about 9 years, and I think I got some insights doing that. At a state level, what the state can do, ever since Florida became a state, Florida has relied heavily upon the federal government, for better or for worse, to instigate water projects. In the beginning, it was during the Everglades. Later, it sort of segued into something different. In the future, it's pretty certain that the full state of Florida is once again going to show its excellence in getting federal funds to improve the hydrology and protect the coasts from what we're looking at now, which is over here today, is sea level rise. I'm confident that politicians in Florida, both Democrat and Republican, can accomplish that goal when they set their minds to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, and we have this question from our audience. What will you do to help the most vulnerable people in floodplains in the face of sea level rise?
That's a lot of the people who are in the floodplains and sea level rise are people who you might normally think wouldn't need much help. The coastal communities, we tend to think of them, and they truly are people often of privilege and class. Having said that, there's no question about it, that sea level hits, they're going to feel about as poor as the rest of us when they're trying to cope with that. So there's going to be problems with insurance, and I don't exactly know what they are going to do about that. In terms of people who really do not have funds, we're probably going to have to figure out some way to, we have a number of years to do this, to create policies that will direct them to live in places that are not under the threat.
As I said before, one of the biggest things that we can do on the state level is advocate for funding for projects for local areas. We can build structures to hold back water. We can build dunes. We can build seawalls. We can build drainage ditches to prevent water from flooding and staying in areas that are at risk. But on the state level, we need to acknowledge that this is happening. We need to provide funding to create solutions, and we need to work on ways in the state of Florida to try and slow down climate change, and to do our part to stop the rise of water.
All right, and what role do you think the state education system should play in education on sea level rise? And is there an education program you would champion?
I think most everyone knows, or I guess this is the question, is they should know that sea levels are rising. Global climate change is a fact. Humans speeding it up is a fact. I think the role that education has in the issue is higher education doing research to come up with projects. We can solve two issues: one with funding of higher education, and two with creating solutions for Florida's issues by providing grants to schools and universities for research to come up with solutions. We can fund climatologists to track and to forecast the future. We can fund engineers to create projects that will help solve our issues, and we need to utilize our higher education system as a way of both creating solutions and empowering our future with better prepared students and better prepared young people.
Hey, thanks. Could you say that question again for me, please?
Sure. The question was relating to education and what role should the state education system play in education on sea level rise, and also, is there an education program you would champion?
Okay, well, I'd like to look at that in two different areas, two different issues. The first one is K to 12. I think that unfortunately in our society today, we have a lot of people who are anti-science. I would call it anti-science politics. I don't think that's such a great idea, and I would like to see our education system not be an anti-science education system as well. The people who are going to be coping with sea level rise are people who are perhaps just getting into K right now. And so K to 12 is a place where we can give them, it's almost like something like a social studies course, where they understand what the science is, what the facts are, and the potential impact on their community. And I think as they go into adulthood, they may perhaps have a clearer perception of the true issues than maybe some of the adults do today. Secondly, in terms of higher education, I'd like to see FGCU do more in terms of some of the research, which I'd like to see funded by the state, possibly by the federal government, which is talking to a gentleman in the audience who raises oysters and clams in Pine Island Sound. And I was thinking to myself that, where I was discussing the fact that I'm still convinced that the red tide that forms 50 miles outside, beyond our shore or beyond the coast, is affected by the runoff in the Caloosahatchee. But when I read peer review, I don't see a lot of support. When I read the literature, I don't see a lot of support for that position. Maybe I'm missing something, but I've been looking for evidence. So I would love to see FGCU answer that question about red tide. That'd be fantastic. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of these questions together because they are asking very similarly themed items. There's a question: do you think overdevelopment near water is destroying wetlands? Do you think that adds to flooding risk? How do we limit that? Would you consider a moratorium on building or on building on or near wetlands? And then there, as a secondary question about fertilizer, would you consider increasing the period of time in which fertilizer use is prohibited? Or would you support a ban on all fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides? What's your plan, as we know that they have runoff potential? So one question about building, and then one question about fertilizer runoff and a moratorium on fertilizers and pesticides. Let's do it with one question. What do you have to say about building and overdevelopment on wetland areas? What kind of actions would you like to see the state take in regards to that?
How about we enforce no loss of wetlands? That would be fantastic. I personally think that a wetland is a very desirable place to have. If you have to fill it in to build on it, I think that I would question that. Having said that, I have to be careful because the house I live in was filled, and most of the people I know, or many of the people I know, very few people in Lee County didn't have some sort of a house that was built in the wetlands. However, we know environmentally that wetlands provide a tremendous buffer and are a safety feature for those areas that are developed behind them. There's something called the state preserve state parks, which used to be called buffer preserves. We have one in Lee County. It's behind Cerro Bay. It's called Cerro Bay Preserve State Park. It was purchased by the state decades ago for that specific reason, to protect the wetlands and also to protect the development behind them. What was the second question about fertilizer? If you're a resident, you probably use too much fertilizer if you use it. It's very difficult for residents to buy just to meter exactly the appropriate amount of fertilizer. I would have no problem not selling fertilizer to any resident. However, I realize that I don't live in a gated community, and my feelings are probably not be shared by a lot of other people. Thank you.
Building, and then fertilizer, and if you live down in Bonita Springs, and especially the southeast part of Lee County, you would know that they are starting to do a lot more development out there, out near Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. The county has been approving more building and more development, and they still aren't collecting the proper amount of impact fees. So we have to make up for that both in taxpayer money and in the environmental impact. We live, and especially out there, is right on top of one of the biggest aquifers. That's where we get our drinking water, and if we keep developing, if we keep building, we are gonna cut off our water because something is gonna get into there, and it's gonna hurt us. I would love to see I'd love to see the state buy up more land. It would be great if the state could buy up all the rest of the land in Florida and preserve it, because we would make a lot of money on property values, because there wouldn't be any more. But we need to also encourage the county to stop rezoning and to stop allowing all this construction. As far as fertilizers and pesticides, I would absolutely put a stop on allowing them, but we also need innovation to create environmentally friendly ones that won't hurt the water and hurt the marine life and hurt the environment when it is eventually washed into the lakes and rivers.
And our next question comes from the audience as well, and pertains to really the only thing that members of the state legislature are constitutionally required to do, which is pass a balanced budget. So on the subject of funding local projects, our audience member asks, given the lack of funds for social issues and current water issues, where will state funds come from to fund these initiatives?
A lot of the state funding comes from sales tax. There is no state income tax. which means that the state gets their money from sales tax and from corporate tax. A lot of corporate tax is businesses. We here in Lee County know very well how big of an impact tourism has. If we are able to fund, or if we're able to either have temporary tax increases like the half-cent sales tax here in Lee County, or if we're able to get rid of subsidies for things like sugar and things like agriculture, if we're able to pull money out of if we're able to pull money out of things like that, then we can instead put it towards projects that will increase the amount of people who want to come and visit Florida, and then we will have more money because they will be spending money and buying things. I think that was the question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm running for the state House legislative. There's 120 seats in the Florida House of Representatives. Right now, the Democrats hold 41. So there's Democrats statewide have a magic number of 20. If we get 20 more guys like us in Tallahassee, then the Democrats have a majority. And at that point, ask that question again. Because once the legislature is changed, and once we have a Democratic governor, which I truly believe we will, and once we have Democrats representing us in Washington, D.C., the numbers will change, and we will find money, and priorities will change. And I truly believe that we can't do much worse than we are doing locally right now than what we have going for us in Tallahassee and Washington. Thank you.
And our next question is also from an audience member, and this is kind of tangentially related. We're kind of transferring from funding at the state level to funding more at the local level. This pertains to impact fees. And this question says, would it be wise to use 100% of impact fee collections as reserves to deal with eventual sea level rise?
No, I don't think that's a good idea. We need impact fees right now to build our infrastructure. As we design our infrastructure going forward, hopefully the engineers, the policymakers who are designing are improving our infrastructure will take sea level rise into account. I know that the Water Management District apparently takes it into account, and the engineers take it into account. So if they take it into account, everybody should be taken into account. So I don't think that's a good idea to bank it for 50 years from now or building a Great Wall. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. We
Can't agree.
oh, sorry. One of the reasons why the county is trying to pass this half-cent sales tax is because the county commissioners lowered the amount of impact fees that could be collected, and they're finding out that it's sucking money from the budget. So they took money from education funds, and now there's not enough money to fund building projects and to fund the mandates that the state level has put into effect. So we need to increase the amount of impact fees collected back to 100%, and we need to use that money to address those issues now. And like Neil said, we need the infrastructure that is made to. We need it to stand up to the future, not just built the same as it currently is or how it was in the past, because then we're not building for the future.
Right, and this next question pertains to something we touched on a little earlier regarding local fertilizer ordinances. And I think this maybe kind of goes, transcends that a little bit to maybe going beyond necessarily needing them. This listener asks, would you work to instate a native landscaping initiative at the state level, which would help to A, allow landowners to revert their land to include native flooded plants, 2, give financial assistance to those who wish to participate, and 3, improve local ecology and water quality?
Of course, there's a number of projects that are. There's a number of ways that we can help the environment by providing assistance to those that need it. Things like having people re-landscape to native species of plants that don't need pesticides. Pesticides and fertilizer is one. Things like helping to fund the repair or replacement of leaking sewer tanks, septic tanks, or connecting those houses with old and outdated tanks to sewer are both ways that we can help people here in Lee County both improve their property and help the environment.
Okay, well, this question it's a soft spot in my heart for this question. I work as an environmental specialist and a resource management specialist for years, and I was out killing Melaleuca and Brazilian pepper, and I'm a huge fan of native plants. If I would moderate that at all, I would say that I appreciate the fact that that we have a gated community or a community might want to have a beautiful place that has plants from all over the world. When I used to work for the state doing land management, I thought it was funny, at Koreshan State Park, they actually have a budget to buy exotic species because those were the species that were planted by the Koreshans 100 years ago. And to keep it historically accurate, they have to keep on going out and buying things that nobody else can buy in terms of plants. So yeah, I'm a big fan of native plants, and if I was elected, I'd introduce a bill to send people money to plant native plants. I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you very much.
And this next question, we've been talking a lot about sea level rise and projections in the future. This is more of an immediate question, as we know we're once again in hurricane season, and we're at the point where typically we see more storm activity later in the season than earlier. But regardless, Hurricane Irma proved an evacuation is impossible. What should the state be doing to correct this?
Well, Hurricane Irma wasn't the first hurricane to prove that evacuation is impossible, but it did certainly reinforce that. I think that you, as a resident, as a citizen, the first level of responsibility really is yourself. And if you live on a barrier island, and if District 76, which we're running for, is very much barrier islands, I wouldn't tell you to rely upon the federal government or the state government or even the county government. Well, the county government does a fantastic job. You have to look out for yourself, and if you get off that island, that's one less person they have to worry about. I can't see any big, huge infrastructure changes to make it more practical to evacuate people in a lot of the area that we'll be representing. Thank you very much.
I think the emergency preparedness tax holiday to help people make their own personal kits and preparations for hurricane season is a good first step. But I think the state and county and towns need to do a build-up. I was born and raised in New Jersey. If I'm sure plenty of people are from up north, before winter, there would be a massive buildup of salt and salt trucks and Department of Public Works people, so that in the event of a massive snowstorm, the state, town, and county governments would be able to act fast and to clear all the snow and to keep the roads clear and to help those in need. And it works very, very well. The state needs the same sort of plan so that they don't need to rely on people from other states to help us.
And we are running towards the end of our time here, so one final question for both of you. If you get elected, at the end of your term, what will you want to consider or be considered your greatest accomplishment?
Can I get a second?
Sure.
I would feel successful at the end of my first term if I knew that I did my best to fight for those here in Lee County. One of my biggest issues with politicians today is that they don't listen to us, they don't listen to our issues, and there's very little showing that they fight for what's important for us. If I can show that I put forth bills and sponsored legislation and worked with as many people as I could to get as much done to benefit us, and if I could come back to you and say, this is what I did, and this is what I want to do in my next term, that would be a success for me.
Okay, so my fantasy is 2 years from now, after I retire from my first term as a state representative, I will have been elected along with 19 other Democratic candidates. We will have a majority in the state legislature. We will have a Democratic governor. We will buy the land south of Lake Okeechobee for whatever price to found Jewel Brothers and Big Cypress wants, and we'll save the day. There'll be no more green algae, and we'll all be heroes, and we'll go on a parade or something like that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That's